So I eventually was let home, but before we went home, we spoke to the bereavement. We were handed over to the bereavement midwives, and then we had to sign some forms around, what type of post-mortem. So at this point, we don't know what the cause of death was. Sorry, and they had some assumptions because of the symptoms and the events that had occurred. So, the loss of blood, not feeling much pain, all of that stuff. And the fact that I had a family history of hypertension. So we signed the forms, and then when we were in the hospital, like the midwife that was on duty, she was fantastic at presenting different options for us. She was like, oh, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Because really and truly, you don't know what to do, right? You've never imagined or thought about being in this situation. So she kept coming in. She's like, oh, we've got this box. You can do a different act. Like, you can take pictures. Do you want to bath her? Do you want to get her dressed? Do you want to create this mold? Like, so she kept presenting different things. And each and every time she kept presenting different things, it was, it was good because it allowed us to start coming to terms with it a little bit. So we did a few of those things, we created like molds, we decorated it. I went to supervise when they bathed her. She had a full head of hair, so like washed her hair. She helped me dress her up and stuff. So yeah. Then after that, we eventually got home, and as family do, they rally around you. So my family was running around me, Yami's siblings came over, so my house was like packed for like about 2 weeks. And like, I think it was nice being around people, but it was also somewhat difficult because, everyone was like, oh, be strong. Obviously I had my moments where I would cry and I was just like spaced out, like just, but it was nice, like, having people around to kind of get your mind off of things. But one of the things I wasn't doing was I wasn't sleeping. It was very evident that I wasn't sleeping because during the day I was just like spaced out, because at night time I was awake, and I will talk about it a bit when I eventually probably talk about PTSD or some form of depression, whatever it is, like the aftermath. But just the thought of falling asleep was crazy. Like every time I fall, and I still am kind of going for it now, like every time I fall asleep, it reminds me of that jerking feeling. So I wasn't doing that. And then I was readmitted into the hospital because my blood pressure was like a skyrocket, and we'll talk about that in another session or whatever it is, because that's just a whole nother story. So fast forward a couple weeks, the bereavement midwife comes to visit me. We talk about I eventually get discharged from the midwife care to my doctors. Then it's like the whole discussion around what are your options. So they had already said to us, you have a few options. You can either have the hospital deals with the funeral and the burial, and that means she would be in a grave with other babies, or you can take care of it yourself. And immediately I was like, there's no way that's going to happen. Like, I want to make sure, she's taken care of. So then they send her to Great Ormond Street Hospital, so they call it GOSH, for the post-mortem. Now, throughout the whole post-mortem process, so she was away, so they say it takes between 6 to 12 weeks. And like throughout the time she was away, I just felt like I had abandoned her. And I don't know why, like I knew she was away, but because I wasn't hearing daily updates around what was happening to her, I just had this sense of, oh my God, I've abandoned my child. So I didn't keep calling, but I was trying to keep in touch with the bereavement team. And all this while, you hear advice, no one really spoke about it directly, like my mom and like older siblings and cousins and stuff, but when they go, how's everything going? No one directly said, are you going to bury her? It was like, just make sure the hospital will take care of it. So automatically there was this assumption that just let them deal with it. You don't have anything to do with it, because of the whole cultural aspect of you shouldn't attend your child's burial. So immediately for me, I was like, when I started talking to some of my friends, I was like, hey, guys, like, where did this come from? Like, what is the whole purpose of not being able to attend your child's funeral? Now, I remember one day I was sitting in the car in Sainsbury's, and I was just crying. Like, there will be days I didn't want, and I don't like crying at home because one, obviously my child's there, and I didn't want to consistently be crying because I didn't want to upset Yummy. So there'll be times where I'll be out and I'll just sit in the car park and just something will trigger me or just break down. And I remember I was crying in that car. Then a friend from work calls me and she was like, oh, how's it going? And that was one of the other trigger points of doing the video the first time, was at some point in time, somebody would call me when I needed to speak, whether it was in the middle of the night or they'd send me a message. And at that point in time, like, Faye calls me and we were talking, and then I was like, hey, that's what I'm really struggling with right now. Like, I just don't understand. Like, I feel like I've abandoned her. Like, how can I just, not lay her to rest, sort of thing. So that really, really was something that was like a burden on my heart. Like, I was like, I can't just not do anything. And I think on top of that, like, while she was away, in my mind, I was like, oh, she's just gone off to the hospital and, they're just doing some checks. She's gonna come home to me. So I still have like her dresses and all the stuff that I had bought in my cupboard. I was like, oh, she's coming home, and, the two of us, and I could have dressed Irawa and her up together and whatever it is. So all the time she was away, I was like, she's away, she's coming home. So I didn't do any of the paperwork. Like, you have to register the baby as a stillbirth because she was past 26 weeks. Is it 20 weeks or 26 weeks? She's past the stage of, it being a miscarriage. So it's an actual birth. So when the bereavement midwife came home, she had told me all of these things. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Just totally shut it out, and I just didn't deal with it. Until eventually I was like, oh my God, like, I need to address this. So, and by the way, I at this point I'm off work, right? So I've taken maternity. I sent an email to my colleagues around, hey, I'm gonna take some time off work. And a lot of those emails that came through and the messages, like, it was so interesting of how much support I kind of drew from it. I don't know why, like, just reading all the prayers and the messages was where I was getting my strength from at that time. Like people will randomly message me at different times as the news kind of traveled. Oh my God, I heard what happened, and I'm here for you to talk to. And one of my colleagues, Andy, randomly, sometimes we will just be on the phone and we'll just have chit chats, and like every person that I had spoken to was kind of sent and needed at that point in time. So anyway, back to the whole process. So I felt like I was abandoned. So I had a conversation, and then for me, because I felt like I was abandoning her, in order for me to get past it, I was like, I have to make the decision that I'm going to, lay my child to rest. And then Yummy and I were obviously not technically on the same page, because he was of the, the belief that, the child didn't come out alive, so therefore we have to make sure we deal with it in that sort of way versus doing a big, massive ceremony. I was like, no, I don't want to do a ceremony. I just want to lay her to rest. Anyway, we eventually come to a compromise that we'll lay her to rest. And because she was stillborn, the funeral directors are able to take care of a lot of the cost and claim it back from the government, which was a good thing. Again, I didn't know that until you have to start researching these things. So we contact the funeral directors, which was given to me by the midwives, and like just even like that level of information, like you're kind of lost. Like I was just totally lost. I was like, I don't know what to do. So now I had to keep calling the midwife. Hey, what do I do next? What do I do? And they guided me through that. The other thing was like just being able to come to terms and that compromise of how we were going to lay her to rest was it. I wouldn't say I was praying about it, but for me as an individual, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't committing a sin to God. And that sounds kind of crazy, like why would you be committing a sin? But growing up in a religious home and Christian, so that was one of the things that I just wanted to get comfortable with. So I spoke to my shepherd about it, and we'll probably have that's another discussion we'll probably have in terms of that whole why it's not allowed. So I came to conclusion, as long as I'm not committing a sin and it's not going to affect my salvation, I'm laying my child to rest. So we spoke about that, and then she was eventually laid to rest on December the 8th. And yeah, we went to Yummy and I went to the burial ground with a priest that the funeral directors helped us arrange. They said a prayer. So I didn't go to the graveside where she was buried, and I didn't see her coffin. I didn't do all of that. Now, that in itself, like, sometimes I'm like, I wish I did, I wish I didn't, but it is what it is. I was happy with the compromise that Yummy and I had to come to. So we bought some really nice flowers. We laid some flowers, and flowers actually. So people were sending me flowers, and it was crazy. One day I remember, like, I like flowers in general. So I remember, like, when Yummy and I were dating, he would always send me flowers. So I like flowers in general. And I remember one day I was looking at some of the flowers that some of my friends had sent me, and they had died. And I stood there and I was like, wow, the oxymoron of life, or like the metaphor of life. Like, there's these beautiful things that live, but at some point in time they die. And I was like, it's unfortunate that my child had to die before she was able to live. And then I was just thinking about the oxymoron of, like, the most beautiful day, or one of the happiest days of my life, which was my sister's wedding, is now one of the worst days of my life, if that makes sense. I was like, wow, like, what is God trying to teach me here, sort of thing. So anyway, I say all of that to say, so we bought beautiful flowers. We put the flowers on her grave, like on the grave, and, you know, we said a few words, said a few prayers, and then she was laid to rest. And that helped. That really helped. Like, it kind of brought some level of closure. Like, you know, she's resting now. Then that was on a Wednesday. Then on the Thursday, funny enough, just so happened to be like, and I remember as we were standing by the on the burial ground, and I remember it was cold that day, and it was sunny but cold, and it wasn't breezy, but because there was sun, it was like again, it was this oxymoron. It was really sunny, you know how it is in the UK, really sunny, but it was really cold at the same time. I remember standing there, and there was this massive breeze that came, and I was like, God, like, heal my heart, help me through this process. Like, it's probably one of the difficult, it is the most difficult thing that I'm going to have to deal with, but you have to help me through it. Because I lost my dad when I was 15, so I've dealt with loss before, but this loss was different. And I still think about my dad and stuff today, but being able to, like, comprehend and accept the fact that she's gone. So I was like, take away the pain and make it a positive outcome somehow. And I remember as that breeze kind of just went over me, I was like, do you know what, let it go, it's fine. So that happened. Then the day after just so happened to be the day that Sean was free to come over and speak to us. And then she brought the post-mortem with her. So the post-mortem conclusion was that, and I remember saying when we signed the papers, like, she's perfect. I know my daughter was perfect. There was going to be nothing wrong with her. Her brain was going to be intact. Her heart, every form of imbalance or whatever you want to call it, wasn't going to be the case with her. Because sometimes they say, like, when you do a post-mortem, you can indicate if there was any, like, deformities or something wrong with the child. And I was like, that's not going to happen. I know my child was perfect because she was created in the image of God. Like, she was going to be perfect. I knew she was perfect. So, and that was the case. So the post-mortem indicated that there was nothing wrong with her. She was the right size for the indication of the fact that I was 36 weeks, 4 days, I think it was. So she was perfect, and they were like, hey, you know, there were some other things that were present, but because of my family history of hypertension, that is probably what caused it. That was probably what triggered the placenta to erupt. So it's called a placenta abruption, but in this case, it's an acute placenta abruption. Now, for me, I was like, what's a placenta abruption? I've never heard of that. I have high blood pressure. I was being treated for high blood pressure, but why have I never been told that one of the potential outcomes or one of the potential risk factors for hypertension was this thing called placenta? So as I started doing my research, it's like it happens to 1% of women in pregnancy. It's just so rare and it's so uncommon that it's not one of the things that they deal with. And I remember saying to Sean, I was like, why do people not know this? Like, every time I've spoken to a few people after this around, oh, you know, it's because it's linked to my high blood pressure. They're like, oh, what, is it preeclampsia? So whenever you think of high blood pressure, you always think of preeclampsia. I was like, it's not preeclampsia, it's an acute placenta abruption. So that's what they're saying is the cause of death, and the fact that I have a family history of blood pressure. So for me, I was like, so now they're saying, you know, on your journey, if and when you want to get pregnant again, you have to be under supervised care. We need to first and foremost get your blood pressure in a way that it's stable, because fact of the matter is, it fluctuates. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low. Like even today when I take it, it's like 160, and I could be just sitting down doing nothing. I could do exactly the same thing the next day and it's 140 or it's 138 or it's 126. So the fact that it's all over the place is part of the issue. So we went through that. She kind of spoke through around the journey to having another baby and what that would look like, and I was like, yeah, I'm not even trying to think about that at the moment. But the fact that it was linked to that, and one of the other things the postmortem indicated was within because they can sort of indicate of when the baby died, and it said she was alive within the last 24 hours. So before her time of birth, which was 8:20 or 8:19, 24 hours before that, she was alive. So for me, I was like, yeah, I know she was alive, because in the morning, I felt her move. When I woke up to go and pick up the cake, she was moving. Like, she wasn't a morning baby like me. She usually moves a lot more between like midday and 4 o'clock. That's when she was the most active. So for me, the fact that she moved and twiggled a little bit in the morning, I was like, I knew she was alive. Like, even as and when I was, I think even when I was doing my makeup, I remember I was like uncomfortable. I was like, oh yeah, she's moving position sort of thing. So that was the other confirmation that it was just such an acute situation, that it just happened and it was so quick. And Sean kind of made me accept and realize that no matter what would have happened, or even if I had got to the hospital, because at that point I was like, so if you're telling me if I had got to the hospital quicker and we didn't do that whole faffing around in the hotel room with the ambulance, could there have been a different outcome? She was like, no, because it's an acute situation, it can happen quite quickly. So we discussed that, and you know, it's coming to terms with that. You know, like I feel like I did my best, and now it's the new normal. You know, so here we are today. You know, I just again felt like I just wanted to give that little bit of gist around what happened, and who knows where this goes. So I've been encouraged to make sure like I am talking about it and raising some form of awareness to this hypertension and the potential impacts, and just the relationship with medicine and being a black individual in the NHS that's had such negative experiences, how you can take a negative experience to be positive to some extent, right? So now I'm living through it. It's hard, really hard, you know, the low moods some days, the high moods the next days, putting on a brave face, going through counselling. Obviously, I haven't been socialising. I don't socialise unless you're my sisters. My husband forced me to go out on my birthday, which was nice, and my friend Elizabeth came, and it was nice kind of just being around other people. But during one of my counselling sessions, it was like, you need to stop suppressing this. Like, you need to get comfortable talking about it, because only God knows when and how I'll be triggered. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get comfortable talking about it. And I believe that God will help me through this. And, you know, now that she's been laid to rest, may she continue to rest in peace. And, you know, we will find a way to live through our new normal. So yeah. Rest in perfect peace. Yeah, no.
Piano,